Isaiah Joe has already established himself as one of the best shooters in the league. We know this. This is who he was as a prospect. Obviously, fell really far in the draft, but most smart draft Twitter folks were clamoring for him inside the top 25, and OKC ended up picking him up, and he's been fantastic. One of the better shooters in the league. Really awesome off dribble shooter. Can actually create space for his jumpers too, pull up movement. But what is underrated about Isaiah Joe is just how good of a defender he has become in his first year playing big minutes in the NBA with OKC. Coming out of Arkansas, defense was always an interesting thing with him. He was so frail and had such a limited physical profile, but he was always such a smart off-ball defender, really physical and tried very hard. And it's great to see a lot of that translating to the league. So let's break down how Joe has become a good defender already at such a young age. He's one of the best off-screen chase defenders in the league already. He's so agile rounding screens. And I've talked about on this channel repeatedly how important this kind of defense is. These kind of actions are, automatics in almost every NBA offense now. There's so much motion, and Joe can dip his shoulder, get low, stay attached, and contest that three. He's so good at not allowing screens to take him out of plays. He's really good at getting a hand up regardless of what happens. Again, physical, getting around the screen, staying tight and attached, and gets a hand in Tim Hardaway's face that very well could have impacted that shot. It's not stuff that'll ever show up in a box score, but it's really high leverage, high impact defense. Here we see Isaiah Joe's awesome instincts for this deflection, but again, trying to run Malik Beasley off this little screen. Isaiah Joe stays attached, gets skinny past this Wendy and Gabriel screen, and then we see the awesome hands and just general reaction speed to nab that steal as well. The ability to having a guard who is an off-screen D specialist is so important in the modern NBA. Such a valuable skill to have. And again, despite Joe's lack of strength, even still, it's improved a lot since college. But he's so physical and willing to fight and stay attached. Obviously ends up fouling here, but gets through a pretty tough Jarrett Allen screen. Is physical, stays attached to Garland. Doesn't need to foul like he did, but the process there of using his footwork to stay skinny and to stay close. Watch him go with the 1-2. Look how close his feet stay to Jarrett Allen's top foot. But he's able to stay in that play really impressively. And this is the kind of stuff that has made Joe, I would probably say a solid positive defender at this point in his career already, which is such an impressive thing for a young player to be, especially one heralded as a shooter. His lateral quickness is pretty good. He's able to slide with a guy like Trey Murphy. Watch how quickly his feet move. He's able to use his length to contest there. Obviously gets manhandled on the offensive rebound, but really nice to see him moving his feet. The strength, though, is an issue, and will probably always limit him from being a really high-level, on-ball defender, especially. He starts this play really great. We'll talk more about Joe's rotational defense, but he's always lurking on the weak side, pressuring post-up guys, and really, early and active recovering. But, against a wily veteran a strong veteran like Eric Gordon, he's just going to get bumped off of his spot, and he ends up actually getting his hand on this ball, but there's nothing he can do with Gordon driving his shoulder into Isaiah Joe and creating a bunch of space. And this is definitely a theme whenever players attempt to drive on him. These stronger, bigger combos are just too much for Isaiah Joe to handle at this point in his career, and probably always will be given his frame issues. And I think what will hold him back from being an elite screen defender is that lack of strength, where the agility is fantastic, as is the physicality and the footwork. But against some of the strongest screeners in the league, he's just not going to have the upper body strength to blow through some other defenders can, like someone like Lou Dort can. And it's going to leave him behind the play. And at the highest level, those are the inches, the feet that can be the difference between getting buckets and not getting buckets. Definitely some improved physicality here, as he's able to stick with Immanuel Quickley here, getting into his body, as this was just not a thing he did at all in college, where he was so susceptible to being knocked over. I love him being okay taking this contact, Quickly hits an insanely tough floater here, but this is as good of defense from Isaiah Joe as you can really ask for in a situation that he struggles. Where the big issue at the point of attack comes with his change of direction and hip mobility, where he gets opened up so easily as an on-ball defender against quick guards. The technique is obviously pretty rough here. He's on his he's like on his heels. He's not in a great stance, but you can just see how slowly the hips turn, like how slowly his hips move around to recover there. And by the time he's even like kind of recovering, he's cooked. There's absolutely nothing he can do. Same in this play where Garland beats him nastily off the screen. And here's just again some poor positioning. Isaiah Joe biting way too hard. There isn't really even a fake here. Garland doesn't really even like sell a fake going left, but Joe jumps this ball screen and does not even have close to the hip mobility and the speed there and the explosion to recover to Garland. This is going to be the stuff that'll keep Isaiah Joe from being like an elite defender. He's not lateral. He's not quick enough, not laterally, but in terms of changing directions, opening his hips, moving as a guard defender against these really high-level on-ball guards. But there is, again, like the lateral quickness just in a straight line when he doesn't have to change directions is really solid. The closeout defense in these situations pretty good when he can have, a guy who's not so threatening as like a burst-based driver like Jeremy Grant when he can stay in front. But the other really amazing stuff is his off-ball defense. Joe's rotational instincts have always been great. You cannot pass lazily around Isaiah Joe. He will sniff out weak passes from his role rotating on the weak side and come in for steals like that. Great job reading that Shea is mismatched onto a big. RJ Barrett is probably not the type of player to make this cross-court skip pass, especially with his non-dominant hand. So Isaiah Joe can sneak over, get a steal, and create a possession for his team. He's really early rotating to tag interior players, especially. He's early rotating down to tag Kevon Looney here. And then he's also able to nab that steal, too. Look at Isaiah Joe making a play on the ball, using his great hands. But then this defense is in kind of a scramble situation, but Joe sprints back immediately, gets in front. Gary Payton hits a contested jumper, but this is a great job of Isaiah Joe, being aware, being active, not giving up on the play because it's like late shot clock scramble. Gets back to his man and forces, a fairly tough shot, all things considered. Joe's awareness is really stout, and for a young defender, it's impressive how few mistakes he makes. He's not one who's going to get caught ball watching or lose his man or really just have record scratches on defense like so many young players do. Like the second that Harrison Barnes gets an advantage on Lou Dort, he has a clear path to the basket. Isaiah Joe is peeling off of his man to step up and stop. And prevent Harrison Barnes from getting clean into the paint. It's really impressive defensive awareness as a whole. And his priorities are really good, stopping these interior drives. The nail defense is great. The nail area obviously being this area on the free throw line. Digs down to interrupt Jabari's drive and ends up making another play at the nail as Christopher tries to spin back and he gets a steal. Joe is so good nabbing these like loose, lazy handles when players will lazily or out of control spin behind him. Like you just can't do that with Isaiah Joe lurking. He's already good enough to nab these steals. And so many young defenders here are just kind of like hovering around this area. They're not active. They're not stunting and ready to recover. And those are the little plays that turn guys from just okay, meh, into really good or great defenders, especially ones without elite physical tools like Isaiah Joe. This is who he's always been, and it's a joy that this is who he's become so quickly in the NBA. I love this play here. Joe is playing a very deep, like weak side zone. Kenrich Williams comes to help with Andrew Wiggins on the post, and there's a 2v1 here. And when Jordan Poole loads up to throw this baseball pass, Kevon Looney looks wide open. But Joe is reading this before the ball even leaves his hand and gets there at the last seconds to make a play on the ball. The off ball like rotational instincts, as we keep seeing, are fantastic. As are just like the little plays, the little tags and recovers. He knows that Brook Lopez is a legitimate threat versus the very small Thunder. So he makes a physical body tag, getting hands on Brook Lopez before recovering out with speed to close out and contest on MarJon. The activity and the little things are really what make Isaiah Joe such a good defender here. As we see a similar play where he's sliding down and then recovering, but because his hands are active, he's in the passing lanes, he's making this a difficult pass. The ball gets out slowly, which makes it a much easier closeout for him. If he wasn't hands active in the passing lanes, this would have been an easier pass, and he might not have been able to close out in time or force a miss like he just did. But because Isaiah Joe was active, he was able to make a play. Again, we see another example of Joe just stepping up, understanding his role as a backline defender. In another world where Isaiah Joe's brain is in like an athletic, rim-protecting wings body, you could have an all-defense level guy. He's just so sturdy and consistent, making these backline rotations and helping out his teammates who falter. He can be trusted to zone the weak side by himself, basically, which he does a lot in this OKC defense. They entrust him with difficult off-ball responsibilities, and he's good making reads, closing out with his pretty good speed, not fouling, and impacting shots as much as he can with his physical tools. Again, we see Joe slide down and take a charge, doing everything he can with his instincts and his brain and his smarts and his positioning. Now, again, just like with the on-ball stuff, the screen defense, there is a limited ceiling because of the physical tools. Even when Joe is in perfect position, he's early, he's right there. If he's matched up against the center, there's not much he can do if that player is going to hit a post hook right over him. And even when Joe is making hard rotations to the rim, there's not very much he can do to contest a 7-footer going up for a lob. He just doesn't have the vertical explosion or the length to make a play on this, aside from fouling, which stops an easy bucket. But it's not going to make the high level impact that other defenders can make. And that same lack of hip mobility, I think, will limit his closeout defense as well a little bit, especially against dynamic pull-up shooters like Seth Curry. Joe's technique on the ball closing out still not perfect, unnecessarily jabs and opens himself up too wide, and then the hips just don't turn fast enough to recover and contest that pull-up. But all things considered, Isaiah Joe is a really good defender. Aside from being one of the best off-ball spacers in the league, Isaiah Joe is already, I would say, a solid positive defender by the numbers, maybe +1 or something. I think EPM has him a little below neutral, which I definitely think a little bit undersells him. The weaknesses will always be there with Isaiah Joe's lack of strength and the hip mobility problems, and especially some technique stuff he needs to clean up. But the awareness, the off-ball instincts, and the agility as a screen defender primarily all are high-level, valuable defensive skills that become even more valuable in the playoffs. I think that's what Isaiah Joe is. He's someone who's going to be a playoff-level rotation player. And the fact that the Thunder got that for nothing is just ridiculous. Such a perfect complement to their core on both ends, and should be a guy who is a valuable 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th man on a legit playoff team for his offense and for his defense.